This is Jeremy Kulish with Main Street Insider reporting for Some of Change. We are pleased to be joined right now by Darcy, two-time congressional candidate and current director of Progressive Congress, which works well. Why don't you tell us?
Thank you, Jeremy.
Progressive Congress.
So Progressive Congress is designed to connect progressives, the progressive movement, progressive ideas, and members of Congress. So help everyone work together to actually make this a more progressive country.
And how did this whole endeavor get started?
So back in 2004, 2005, 2006, there were people who were running progressive organizations inside and outside of Washington, D.C., who recognized that there was a gap where the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is the largest ideological caucus in Congress, didn't have any entity whose job it was to connect those progressives in Congress with the rest of the movement in ways that could be constructive. And so they gradually formed a board, put together the organization, and then in April of 2009 hired me to run the newly formed organization.
What is the real specific draw for that role for you?
Well, we have a country that's a lot more progressive than you would know by listening either to our media or seeing what is possible to do in Congress right now. And my goal was to try to figure out where the point of maximal leverage was for making progressive change happen in this country. I can't believe, for example, that right now we're talking about laying off hundreds of thousands of teachers while we've just shipped more money to Afghanistan, where we're spending $100 billion a year to chase down the remaining 50 Al-Qaeda members who are in Afghanistan. That's ridiculous.
And as you were saying, we're also talking about cutting Social Security.
We're talking about cutting Social Security. There was a fight for health care and what the shape of health care reform was going to be. In the end, the fact that progressives inside and outside of Congress were working together is how we got to center the debate on a public option. And we ended up with a much better and more progressive bill with better subsidies for working families, with things like community health clinics for people who were having trouble finding doctors, than we would have gotten without progressives working together inside and outside.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how exactly that happened. Because I mean, that's what I'm most interested in, and I think that's what a lot of our viewers are interested in too.
Sure.
How exactly did that happen? How did we all get coordinated, and where did the effect play out?
Well, so in February and March of 2009, so very, very early into the new administration, not very long after the big inauguration, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, it was then 60-some members, it's now a little more than 80 members of the U.S. House of Representatives and a couple of senators, sat down to talk about what their priorities were going to be in the new Congress. And it was clear that one of the priorities was going to be health care. So they had a discussion about what line they wanted to draw around health care. What did they want to fight for? Now, most of the members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus are huge proponents of single payer as the right solution to this. Every American should be able to buy into Medicare and get the health care they need and not have to worry about the insurance companies denying them based on pre-existing conditions or raising rates or any such thing. But the view was that they wouldn't get a seat at the table to even be part of the talks if the only thing they were willing to talk about was single payer. So they agreed that they would draw a line and insist that at least a public option be a part of the health care bill that was going to go through. Now, there had been a whole bunch of groundwork that had been laid prior to the election, actually, by outside organizations like the AFL-CIO, like think tanks like the Campaign for America's Future, to try to figure out how this debate was likely to play out and what they could do to shape it more progressively. So what the Progressive Caucus was doing was building on a lot of groundwork that the outside had already done. But they released a letter that they had sent to leadership in March of 2009 saying, we won't support a bill that doesn't include at a bare minimum a public option. Now, they weren't getting a lot of traction around that letter. Nobody really took the progressives all that seriously. And when I came on board in April, one of the first things I did was I started talking to the press. I started talking to our allies on the outside. I started talking to Move On and Democracy for America and Adam Green, who at the time was just starting the PCCC. I started talking to blogs about why it was strategic to build the institutional power of progressives in Congress and why the healthcare fight was an important fight for that. And we got everyone on board somewhat gradually, but by August of last year, and it was actually at Netroots Nation last year, I gave a closing keynote in which I laid out as clearly as I could why this was strategic for progressives inside and outside of Congress. And we saw this tremendous movement and alignment around the public option and around focusing on how we could help Congress move more progressive policy on healthcare and on other things.
And I remember that time. I was there for that keynote. You could sense that the movement coming together on that issue. And I think the real power of that, as exemplified in the rapid expansion of PCCC, for example,
Yes.
Is in that real understanding of the inside-outside collaboration.
Yes.
That's where power comes from.
Yes.
I feel like the right's been really mastering that for the past year. That's why they've been beating us.
Yes.
Now, tell me if you have any further thoughts.
Yeah, it's true. There's typically been better inside-outside coordination for the right than for the left. One of the dynamics that we're facing right now is when Newt Gingrich took control of Congress in 1995, after the 1994 elections, he defunded what had been the internal think tanks for progressives in Congress. Congress had had internal think tanks where there would be these shared staffers who would analyze legislation as it was coming through, analyze the amendments, talk about who was for it or against it, to pool resources to be a lot more efficient. Gingrich defunded those, and on the right, they'd already set up outside institutions like the Heritage Foundation to provide the messaging research, the information about legislation, the policy prescriptions. On the left, we had nothing, and we had nothing for a very long time. We're just now finally starting to look at what it will take to catch up to the right in terms of being able to do that inside-outside collaborative work to move policy.
And where does Progressive Congress fit into all that? And what do you see in the near future in terms of building up that?
Well, I tend to think of Progressive Congress as a bridge. We're not attempting to duplicate what any of the existing outside organizations are doing. I don't want to duplicate what any of our terrific think tanks like the Center for American Progress or the Campaign for America's Future or the Economic Policy Institute are doing. There's no need for that. We don't need another Move On. We don't need another PCCC. But what we do need is a bridge between those organizations and our allies in Congress. I'm actually doing a panel tomorrow called the tip of the spear, engaging with progressives in Congress. And I tend to think of it as though all of us in the outside movement are a very large, heavy piece of wood. And that's great, right? We've got a tremendous amount of mass that we can use for something. But a piece of wood isn't all that effective as a weapon until you add the sharp, pointy metal bit at the end and it becomes a spear. The members of Congress are that point that can actually drive policy home. If we can align those two things, the potential to have impact is enormous.
So I want to ask you, I know you don't have much time, but I wanted to just see how you got into politics. I know your story is very interesting, so can you just elaborate your beginnings and how you got into this crazy sector?
Sure. Well, I was a very happy Microsoft employee, actually. I'd been in technology since I graduated from college. My degree is in computer science and economics, very geeky. And I had, in early 2003, two things happened that really changed my perspective on how I needed to be spending my time. The first thing was a terrific thing, which is that my son Henry, who's now 7, was born. The second thing was a less terrific thing, which is that about 2 months after Henry was born, my brother Jason was one of the people in the initial invading force in Iraq. And I have this really vivid memory of holding Henry in one arm while packing a care package for Jay, and realizing that there was no set of choices that I could make about my son and whether we fed him organic food, what school district we lived in, no set of choices that I could make that was going to be sufficient to give him the life that I wanted him to have if we didn't change the direction of the country. So I did what any rational parent would do. I left my job and quit my career and ran for Congress. Seems
good, the country.
totally normal. Well, I actually think that more people getting involved in politics, as we have seen over the last several years, is a very, very healthy thing for our democracy. Whether they're getting involved by running for office or by blogging or by participating in Credo's actions or doing things with Move On or organizing discussion groups in their communities, however people are doing it, the increased level of engagement in politics is really good for our democracy.
How have you found the conference so far?
I love this conference. I actually find it really inspiring. It's amazing to be in a conference center full of people who are intent on changing the world and making it a better place for all of us. That's incredible.